Uh, a very important, very contemporary subject of corruption, of ethics, of moral values. Uh, our country has been afflicted with this, as you all know, for a very, very long time. And we all know where it stands when you look at the international rating as far as our country is concerned. It emerges around 75th out of 175 countries. The survey that was undertaken again by one of the Berlin-based watchdogs, it brought out that almost 62% of the Indians had personally given bribe during their time. And this is a study of 2005. So we are not rated very well. I will not beat about the bush. Let me tell you what I feel the reasons as to why this corruption is there and what needs to be done in this 10 minutes that I've been given. And it's a very beautiful way of putting the speaker under pressure by telling him that he's going to speak only for 10 minutes. You know, a guy like me, a chief who had an audience of almost 1,000-odd people and captivating, totally a captive audience, and I could speak for hours. 10 minutes is, I would say, very little, but doesn't make a difference. Right? When you look at the reasons, I feel, firstly, ours is one country where affluence, where wealth connotes status and power. And traditionally, in our society, anybody who is wealthy, he's deemed to be a person very powerful. He's respected by everybody. You see all your movies. Most of the movies are made on those lines in our country. The second is that the legacy of the British. Goras, when they ruled us, when they were here, the colonial infrastructure that they had, the mechanisms that they had, the methodology of the governance that they had, where they ruled us with a certain amount of iron hand, very autocratic style, willy-nilly it got passed on to us post-independence. And that's where the government servant, the civil servants, people who had money, who were wealthy, who had power, who had position and status, continue to exploit the people, the have-nots. So that it continued as part of our society, our culture. The next thing which I feel is that we have not been able to create the requisite deterrence. There is no dearth of a regulatory framework in our country. There's no dearth of monitoring mechanisms in our country. But what has lacked is the ability to enforce these regulations. And the reason for this is that we have been always a value-based society. India was traditionally a value-based society, where people, if you recollect, in golden days, they never used to put a lock to their houses when they went out. But today, you cannot even afford to leave your car unlocked. It will be missing by the time you get back from a shop. Now, that's a kind of corruption that has set in. It is the values. And when Professor Charan Singh introduced me, he brought about, and I'm thankful to him for having praised the Indian Army. Indeed, it is amongst the best organs of the state. It is an instrument of last resort. It's one of the most disciplined instruments of the country. Why is it? Because of the values. It's an institution which is based on the values of integrity, loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, courage which is both moral courage and physical courage, and last is honor. And when I was here last time, I had mentioned very briefly about it. Integrity is doing the right thing legally and morally. Doing something right when you're not being watched. It's your inner drive that tells you, look, I shouldn't be doing this. And why Army has been able to, as compared to other organizations, because I can tell you even your IIM Bangalore has got values. All institutions have values. I go to the corporate houses to interact with them. I find every corporate house having vision, mission, and values being given. But please, those values are only to be displayed on walls, I find. Values have got to be practiced till they become a habit. And that is what we do in the Army. The Army is different from others because those values are made into habits of individuals and collectively of the entire organization. Values govern the individual and collective behavior in an organization. And that is what we focus on. When a person joins, the day he dons the uniform olive greens, he is conditioned mentally, and his heart is conditioned as well to make sure he never falls prey to any reckless impulses in life. But yes, we do have aberrations. We've had certain scams. People have been involved. But trust me, 99% of your army, your military, is devoid of this kind of corruption because this is a value-based organization. And therefore, I'll talk about it. When you talk in terms of what we need to do is, we've got to get back those values into our society. That's a fundamental thing. Other thing is that why corruption is there is paucity of resources. When there are less resources, demands are more, you'll find people clamoring for those little resources which are over there. And people who are in between, the mediators, are the ones who enjoy, they make hay. And this is where corruption comes in. And there are people who have money with them to get those resources, cut corners. They deviate from the rule position. They are the people who create problems. The other is about the low pay scales again. You see, in the country, unless you give your people the right amount of money to live, to get basically the 3 square meals, they will not be happy. People will tend to do something which is wrong. And I'm glad that this government, present government, is highly focused on it. You would have seen the way the pay scales have been taken up, minimum being 18,000. I think that is going to make a difference. And there is a lot of focus by the present government as far as the ethics are concerned. Now, even the corporate houses, when I interact with them, I find are not, ones which have been insulated from this. In fact, all organs of our state have been, I would say, plagued by this corruption malice which is over there. All 3 pillars of our democracy, the administration, you name a sector of India which has not been plagued by corruption. It is very much over there. And the reason is only one, as I said earlier, that unless we are able to institute measures and we are able to give exemplary punishment to people, things are not going to improve. Now, very briefly, since I was given 10 minutes and I jotted on my points this evening after I had a discussion with Professor Charan Singh over lunch today, if you were to ask me an actual plan, very broadly, if you go into the administrative reforms which have been undertaken in the country, it was done by Mr. Moli, the second administrative reforms, which actually talks about ethics in governance. It talks about a people-friendly governance. It talks about e-governance. There are a large number of recommendations, as I said earlier. The regulatory framework, the monitoring framework is very much there. And if you go into, those of you who are studying over here, who intend getting into this subject, get onto the internet and see the second report which has been given out by the Administrative Reforms Commission of 2007. And everything is covered in that. We don't have to discuss this. But the point is, despite everything being over there, that will is not there. And when you find these articles on willpower in the magazines, I find people are talking in terms of willpower, developing willpower of not eating pizza and not having Coke. And those are the articles. Nobody writes on willpower to fight those reckless impulses which make a person go astray and deviate from the laid down norms and red lines which are defined by legal and ethical norms, moral norms. Nobody does that. But that is what the army does. So I was telling you, that's where we condition the heart and minds of our soldiers to make sure they conduct themselves within the framework of those red lines. And those red lines are nothing else but legal and moral constraints, which we give them. Now, the education system is something we got to look into. I think everything starts from there. Because unless we start teaching our kids, when a kid goes to school, we'll not be able to improve. Ours is a society where, do you know that if you get onto the internet, you will find a formula which has been given out to how to calculate dowry? Are you aware of this? Please, I mean, look, after retirement, I got a lot of time. So I go into all kinds of, reading. I do a lot of reading. I write as well for the week. You will find my article coming on this Friday, or it's on AFSPA, of course. But I write every fortnight in the Week magazine. And to my horror, I found there's a formula which has been given out. There's a website which tells you how to calculate your dowry. And it is based on what rank you're holding, what's your age, how much you're going to live, your longevity, all kinds of nonsense. Now imagine in a society like ours where a person is going to take 30, 40 lakhs of dowry, how the hell is he going to ensure, or his dad is going to, who's given the money? You mean to tell me that money has come unless he's a Rothschild and he's been able to accumulate that money? But if he's a government servant, he's in the corporate sector, he's going to do wrong things to accumulate that wealth for his daughter's wedding. Why are we allowing this? Why is that website there when we have NTR with us in our country? People should have been able to discern this and take it out, and this person should have been behind the bars. Ours is a country where when you speak to somebody, you will find people still in the villages. I belong to a rural belt of Punjab. And you will find people saying, हाँ बच्चे ऊपर की कमाई कितनी है? The first question asked in marriage, when the negotiations are going on, कि ऊपर की कमाई कितनी है? I mean, this is our India. We've got to change the education system. We've got to change the psyche of the people living in the villages. And it can only be done through a very, very comprehensive education system, which starts from grassroots level, when a kid is born, when a child is born. Because the child is finding his dad a policeman who gets home in the evening and starts counting notes, in addition to the salary he gets. That kid is psyched already. That, look, dad has been making extra money, I need to do that. We can't have we can't have grooms for sale, we can't have our individuals for sale. We've got to be living within our own means and living by the rule book. That is ultimately what education system should be looking at. The other point I want to bring out is about the e-governance. A lot of focus on this. In fact, I talked about the administrative reforms of 2007. It talks about e-governance. It brings out. And this e-governance, the moment it comes in, there is focus of the present government. We are going in for 100 smart cities. We are going in for smart villages. You will find with this connectivity more transparency, more accountability, more connectivity of the people with the government, better response by the government. It will be far more cost effective the moment you get into e-governance. So ultimately, technology is something which is going to make sure we are able to monitor. We're able to monitor the people who are doing wrong things, catch them before they do the wrong thing. Because there are a large number of scams you've had in our country. And I don't want to take more than 10 minutes. I've crossed the red line of 10 minutes. It's still within it. As I said earlier, Army too is something which has actually not remained insulated. We've had our problems, essentially problems with regard to procurement. And we have ensured the system is such, it's a heterogeneous decision-making body which decides as to what needs to be done. We have taken away the discretionary powers of people who suo moto unilaterally could decide on certain acquisitions. It's done through collective wisdom. It's done through a collaborative effort. And there's transparency to the extent possible. Like you can't afford to, you see, before you tender and you give out your certain thing, you cannot afford to start giving away things, which perhaps will be detrimental to the entire process. But keeping the constraints, keeping in mind the provisions of DPP, the system is far more transparent than it was earlier, let me tell you this. And things are moving the way they are, and rightly so. Once we have our own Make in India initiative consolidating, you don't have to go across our borders to fetch things for our combat power, for our military. They're going to be available in India, and that's what the government is looking at. So I suppose these things are going to make a difference. And lastly, again, I would say that, and I would be open to question, I've only just given you a tip of the iceberg. It's a massive iceberg which needs to be understood. I think we all understand, but we do not know how to deal with that iceberg. And we are going to be just touching 10 minutes each, just the tip part of it. 90 minutes, I suppose, which we have discussion later on, we shall be able to go underwater and see the massive structure of that iceberg and how to melt it, how to make sure it does not destroy our country. Because it takes the country back. Corruption, it actually, it impedes the growth of the country. I mean, if today India is not a global power, it is inching towards it. It is inching because of the corruption. And thanks to the present government, I would say, I've been for 2.5 months with the present government. And ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, I'll take a minute more. When I was the chief, I have seen a metamorphosis in the functioning of the certain ministries in Delhi. I was essentially with the previous government as a chief. 2.5 months I was with the present government. And the kind of changes which the Prime Minister has brought in, the cleanliness as part of this Swachh Bharat. Today you walk into the army headquarters, you walk into any ministry, you will find cleanliness, spick and span corridors, which were not there earlier, let me tell you this. People for lunch break would continue with their afternoon siesta after, khanchoing their idlis, parathas, and dosas. They would go off to sleep in the lawns of South Block and North Block till cows came home. And from there, they used to go back home. I'm telling you this, I've seen this. My PA, when I joined the military operations as a colonel, my first tenure in the MO, my PA would come in the morning at 11. So I asked my people, I said, why is he coming at 11? He's supposed to be here at 9. He said, sir, you can do sausage about it. He will come at 11 only. Then I called him, I said, why are you coming at 11? He said, I stay at Charki Dadri or someplace, he told me. So he used to take a train and come. I said, haven't you taken a house here? I was told he's taken a house. I checked up. So I said, why are you not staying in your house? He had given that on rent. So he was making money from there as well. You see, the corruption was institutionalized. Courtesy of the present government, let me tell you this, none of these things are happening. People are being taken into account. People are coming to offices on time. Biometrics are there. Make sure a person, he enters over there, touches his thumb, his fingerprints, he gets into the office, and when he leaves, everybody knows what time he's leaving. And that kind of accountability is very much required in our country. That time belongs to the country. Those 8 or 9 hours or 10 hours that government has asked you to work for the country belong to the government. And anything that is defying public interest, and you start putting your personal interest over public interest, you are into corruption. You are into corruption when you defy the moral and legal boundaries and red lines which are over there. And I think that is what ultimately all of us has got to be a takeaway. Wherever we are, if we can sit together, make sure a child, because look at J&K. You know, somebody asked me how much time will it take to improve the situation in J&K. If a generation in a particular state, or any part, I was in Congo as well. And I said, look, if it has taken 10 years or 2 decades for people to form certain frames of reference, it is going to take the equal amount of time to efface those frames of reference and make them into proper citizens. So it's not an easy thing. But since it is going to be difficult trying to change people who are adults, who are seasoned at cutting corners and taking the system for a ride, you've got to start from the child who's born and take this child up as a great citizen, as an accountable citizen of the country tomorrow, who will make sure that he or she contributes to the happiness of this country, to the comprehensive power of this country, to make sure India is thrown up into its position, into its rightful position in the community of nations. Thank you very much.